Hey, my name is Joshua Smith here. I'm with the Home Agent Group. Thank you for coming to the channel and checking this out. We're going to debunk some real estate myths and misconceptions, answer some of these questions that I found just by doing a little quick Google search on real estate misconceptions. What are the myths that people believe about real estate transactions, real estate agents, and how this can and does work? I got a call yesterday from someone who I just started working with that told me a horror story, likes of which I hope none of you ever have to experience. I think if you know the answers to some of these questions, or if you have some of these myths debunked, it will help you out in your process, in your journey when buying or selling real estate. 2024, let's debunk some real estate myths and dive into this. On Google, if you look up real estate misconceptions, which I did, look at this, home inspection is not necessary. Just these just these rows here have me curious. Renting is cheaper than buying. I can go ahead and say I can answer these questions right now, but I want to just get into one of these websites. Let's go to 31 common real estate myths debunked. This is gobankingrates.com. You can open a bank account, or you can read about common real estate myths. All right, so these common real estate myths: looking at homes is the best first step. Without even looking at what they say, my initial impression of this is yes and no. It's subjective. If you know that you can buy a house without getting pre-approved for a mortgage, like you have cash, then yeah, sure, looking at homes is going to be the best first step. But really, the first step is figuring out how you're going to pay for something, so you know what your budget is going to be, because that's going to dictate a lot of what your search criteria entails. As in, you got a small family, you need to buy a 4-bed, 3-bath house. We know this because you have the family and you need the house. But how much house you can afford boils down to what you're pre-qualified for. And I think actually that's probably going to come up here, pre-qual versus pre-approval. But just looking at first homes is the best first step. Sure, it's tempting. Let's see what they say. Tempting to visit homes. The truth: assume you'll be financing your purchase. Yeah, see, exactly. The first step is to get a pre-approval letter or pre-qual letter at minimum. Let's talk about pre-approval versus pre-qualification, because I think one myth. Let me just scroll down here. Do they have it in here? 20% down payment. Getting pre-approved will hurt your credit. Okay, so this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. So, pre-approvals versus pre-qualifications. Pre-qualification is it's a soft pull on your credit. It's not going to hurt your credit score, not necessarily. It's not going to ding it a few points like getting pre-approved will. And also, when you're in that process getting pre-approved with lenders, plural, you can shop around. You've got, they probably have like a 2-week window in here. I've heard it can be a little bit longer than that, up to 6 weeks. You can shop around and look for a loan. It's best to keep it concise within like a 2-week period. If you apply to 3 or 4 different lenders, brokers who do mortgage brokers, okay, that's not going to hurt your credit as much as applying now, getting approved for a loan, and then shopping for a couple of months and then going and getting approved again later. That's going to ding you twice, and they're going to be treated as separate solid hits on your credit score. So getting pre-approved, or I'm sorry, getting pre-qualified, this is just them looking at your credit history, looking at your debt to income, and telling you about how much you can afford based on what they can see. And they'll even be able to run these calculators that they have on the back ends. The brokers that I work with, at least, can run these calculators in the back end and tell you pretty much how much house you can afford. So money is a big thing, and would have helped this person I'm working with yesterday when she called me. I was thinking, like, did they not just go through a real pre-qualification process? She must not have. It can get you in a tight, hairy situation if you're not actually approved to purchase and qualified to purchase what you're shopping for and putting offers out on. What's another? Let's see. There's plenty of time for this is exactly what I was thinking in the back of my mind. There's plenty of time for pre-approval when you find the right house. That's absolutely not true. Most offers will not be accepted without a lender approval letter or some kind of proof of funds, right? So if you're a cash buyer, you need to be able and willing to show that you've got the cash to cover the purchase. When it comes to pre-approval for finding the right house, and you might think that you might have great credit, right? But you might have high debt payments that are eating too much into how much you make every month. That's fine for you right now. You're renting, maybe you have like a studio apartment, you're trying to buy a house, and you know you can afford more because you could pay some of those debts down, reduce some of those payments, consolidate some things. But you haven't done that yet. Well, you go put an offer on a house, you haven't talked to a lender yet, all of a sudden you're not qualified and you can't fund that house. And if you can't get that loan approval within 3 days per a Tennessee contract, you're out. Same thing in Alabama. The days might change from state to state by might vary a little bit, but you only have a couple of days to get that actual qualification for the loan, approval for the loan. Man, now I'm getting the terms mixed up. This has got me. All right, let's go back up to the top. Hold on. You don't need an agent to buy a home. I'm gonna pause here, let you comment whatever you might want to comment on that one, because I'm an agent. I'm not going to take it personally. If you think that you don't need an agent, any situation where you don't have an agent might be okay. A buyer's agent and a seller's agent are the representatives for both sides. And if there is only one agent involved because someone just comes with a cash offer off market, for example, totally fine. That agent can then represent both sides, facilitate both sides, which I think is the most ethical way to do it as an agent, because agents have a fiduciary responsibility to their clients, to all parties involved in a transaction. New construction is another situation where you could easily not use an agent to go locate that property, because you can just use the construction company's, the builder's agent to facilitate that transaction. Again, they're just going to facilitate the transaction for you, or they may actually assign a buyer's agent to you and have a seller's agent for the listing side, potentially, depending on what kind of agency relationships that they have set up for a certain development. But having an agent involved as a buyer out of the gate, we have great relationships with lenders that we work with and can usually know where a lot of those deals and better rates are going to come from. New construction, for example, using their lender, always going to be a good option for you because they're going to have deals and relationships with those lenders. The builder is going to have a relationship with those lenders where they can give you big discounts and big incentives to help you out of the gate. Big plus. But on the open market out there, when it comes to existing real estate, negotiating the deal and making sure that you're well cared for and considered in the transaction, it's always a good idea to have a representative and have a buyer's agent involved who understands your needs. And that's key too, is getting with someone who really does understand what it is that you need for this transaction, whether you're buying or you're selling. This is specifically talking about buying a home, but you know, for sale by owners, you call it FSBO, whatever. When you're selling without an agent as well, I've come in the middle of an offer situation with family, with friends, to help out in a transaction and facilitate, but as a request of the listing agent because the buyer was unrepresented, and they just felt like, you know what, this is going to get real hairy real fast if we don't have somebody that really knows what they're doing to help us out. So we'll bring in a title attorney, get everything all set up and get it all handled. But let's just see what these guys say. Buyer agents have a duty to put your best interests in the transaction at the forefront. They can provide you with knowledge about the current market conditions and use their expertise to negotiate the best deal for you. Couldn't have written it better for myself, but you know, let's be real. People don't know. If you don't know an agent personally, it can be really hard to go out and just go build a relationship with somebody who you never met, who you think is just going to try to sell you the most you can get. And the reality is that, you know, not everybody's out there to get you. I know from my perspective, it's in my best interest to serve you and your needs the best, so that we actually have a successful transaction and it's not a bumpy road as you go, because deals can there's many reasons that real estate transactions can fall apart as a result of a lack of information, a result of a lack of truth. So the more we can identify the realities and disclose, and just get the right buyer with the right seller, the right purchaser with the right home, that's the best and most effective way to have a successful transaction. I'm gonna get off of that soapbox. Man, all right. Buying a new home means few repairs in years to come. Well, that's just not true. Do they talk about home inspectors, employ a home Yeah, okay, that's the answer. Of course. Now, actually, this goes back to having an agent involved in like a new construction. The idea of you go to a new construction community and can't have a buyer's agent, absolutely not true. In these situations with new construction, especially in the last few years with how fast homes are being built, you really want to have a home inspection done. Not just with, I mean, every existing home you're ever going to walk into, you're going to want to get it inspected. Someone lived there before, appliances are a little bit older, even if they're only a couple years older, so you're always going to want to inspect those houses. But just because it's brand new doesn't mean that you don't need a home inspection. Yes, you're going to walk the house with the builder many times over the course of the months that house is being built. And yes, you're going to have a home warranty that's going to cover everything top to bottom for the most part with most builders. But you want to have someone who knows what they're looking at, look at the framing in the attic and make sure that your roof is actually put together effectively. We've all seen those videos, or at least those of us that are paying attention to real estate on Instagram, TikTok, wherever, of these frames, joints that aren't even touching, you know, like the rafters, they're not even touching that joint up at the top, that beam across the middle. And then some of it's being supported by a 2x4 for some redundant reason, but then you look at it and you're like, oh, 2x4 is actually holding the whole damn thing up. A 2x4 is a 2-inch, it's about this wide, okay? It's supposed to be held together by a board that's at least that wide, if not that wide, depending on how long the stretch is. So these are things that you want your home inspector and your agent to help you look for when the home is being built and before you go to close on that deal, because these things can all be changed and modified and corrected before you get into the home as you're going through that deal. And I'll say too, it helps to hold the builder and the managing people involved on the builder's side accountable when you have an agent and they know you're going to bring in a home inspector. So always ends up being a better situation for you just as a management perspective. Let's scroll on down here and see what else is down here toward the bottom, because I think we're about 5 or 6 in. I don't even know how many we're in. Buying is always a better financial deal than renting. Buying is better than renting. It's going to depend on the market, first and foremost, and where rates are. That's going to affect price points so much. Right now, it's sort of a toss-up. 2024, I mean, in the areas where I work across Middle Tennessee, except for in some of the more rural areas, but then again, because of where rates are, yeah, for generally speaking, renting is probably going to be cheaper than purchasing, actually. But from a financial decision perspective, if you're want to move to Nashville, buy a home. Right now, because rates are sort of unstable, it might be a better idea to just rent for a year, for 2 years, 6 months even. Get to know the area well and know exactly where you want to be, right? But then also you can build a relationship with a realtor across that time, with a lender and whoever else across that time. Make sure you're set up financially and can answer these types of questions. But yeah, because we want to allow rates to come back down, maybe you can definitely afford the type of house that you're looking for, as opposed to just, you know, the house that you can buy at that particular time. If you A, have a little bit more money saved up, or B, just the rates can come down enough to shave off that couple $100 a month to give you a slightly bigger, better house, or just a house in the right location. And in that same spot, you might be able to rent a lot easier. Just as an example. Now, some areas outside of Nashville, is it better to rent versus, I mean, look, it really is, this is such a subjective question, because I can think of really good examples. I have a rental property where we can charge higher rent than you could buy that house for, but that's in Clarksville versus Nashville, where the rental rates really have skyrocketed the last few years, just like prices. And so it's sort of head to head. It kind of depends on your financial situation. I'm always a fan of investing so that you can build equity in that asset, but that all depends on how much liquidity you have to get into it from an investment perspective, right? How much of a down payment you can make, and this is a hairy area. Let's look at their truth. What do they say? Your upfront costs, such as points, so the APR, the annual percentage rate, closing costs, insurance, interest, and maintenance must all be figured into a long-term cost comparison. Right, so it is going to sometimes cost a lot more to own a home as the homeowner. Plumbing is your problem, electricity is your problem. So depending on where you want to be and the types of houses you can get into, what you can rent there versus what you can buy there. Yeah, those are definitely cost comparisons to make in every purchase, but I'm just thinking, one-to-one cost comparison, your escrowed payments, which is going to include insurance, interest, and all the things involved in the loan, as well as the property taxes, versus just renting and not having any of those headaches of that can boil down into owning like an older home, especially I'm thinking of. But add the cost of selling your, so these guys are basically just telling you to budget it effectively. That's right, budget. Single family homes are more affordable than multifamily dwellings. A multifamily home can be more affordable if you rent out the extra space. Yeah, exactly. But then again, it also depends on where we're talking about here and the type of multifamily that we're talking about. That gets into some investment criteria that I don't know if we want to get into all that right now, actually. Let's skip over that one. Because the truth is that multifamily, can pay for itself. Single family can also pay for itself if you rent out rooms. They call it house hacking, where you can buy a house and then rent out a couple of rooms to pay for your mortgage, or buy a duplex and rent out the other side, pay down the mortgage. So you're basically free and clear on that. And actually, it can be easier to get a pre-approved for a loan on multifamily if it has an existing lease. And I do see a lot of duplexes actually for sale, and the owner lives on one side, was renting the other side. And they're just looking to get out of that, upgrade their situation. Maybe they've saved enough money to go now buy, their next house or whatever that is. I don't know. Let's see. You must sell your current home before buying a new one. I think this might be the last one we do today, because this one actually hits home for me too. Just this week I had a meeting with a couple of different sellers. A lot of sellers right now, a lot of homeowners who want to sell and buy and upgrade, they really do need to have that net, that amount that they can make from the equity of their house, the difference between what they owe and what they can sell for. That money is going to be used for their down payment for their next house. And if it's not big enough, it is going to be cost prohibitive in some instances, especially with where rates are right now, for them to upgrade or just to cross grade, just to move to another side of town, even if they're not buying something bigger, even if they're downsizing. So this really does depend. It's very situational. If you don't have savings that will give you that will help you get into a purchase, right? Even if it's just a small down payment to get you into a rate and a monthly payment that you can afford, then yeah, you probably will have to sell in order to buy. Now, home sales can be contingent upon one another. Home purchases and sales can be contingent upon one another. So what that means is you can, when you go to sell your house, you can put in the listing on the private remarks or as a public remark that the seller wants to locate a home as a contingency of the purchase or as a contingency of the sale. So then they don't actually have to sell the house if they don't find something that they can buy, can afford. In those situations, I tend to start a search for that seller before we go to list their house or try to sell it off market, try to get under a longer term contract that will give them a little bit more time to look around. If you're going to But yeah, when you go to purchase, if you don't have a down payment, again, that might be the situation that you're sort of stacked up against. That just boils down to planning and contingencies, okay? That's what I'm getting to. Now, if you further that point, if you can't afford the payments and for both homes, and you can afford to put a small down payment in to get you where you need to be on that mortgage, two things to remember here. Your first month is going to be forgiven, basically. You're going to skip the first month's payment. Your first mortgage payment on your new home will be 2 months from that date. So if you can get pre-approved for a mortgage without having to sell your existing home, you can pay for both, then great, you're all in. Then when you do sell that your existing home, you can actually do what's called a recast. So it depends on the lender, but I think it's within 6 months. You can go and take your additional down payment, put it onto the note, and they'll recast it. And it keeps the same rate, or you could try to refinance at that time, but it'll keep the same rate, and it'll reduce your monthly payment by as much as that down payment can reduce the monthly payment, if that makes sense. So recasting is something that you can do if you can buy a home before you sell your existing home. Another thing that you can do is refinance after you sell the home if you're going to hold on to both for a while to help reduce your monthly payment on your new home down the road a little bit if the rates are a little bit too high right now. That's just good knowledge to have for anybody looking for a home to buy at the moment. But yeah, let's see what they say. Talk to your lender about extra requirements. Extra requirements to keep your present home as a rental property and generate tenant income. That's good advice, but not everybody wants to be a landlord, right? These might include a special type of appraisal. Sure, and a bank or investment receives 2 to 6% unless your present home is paid off. As long as you're covering 75% of the mortgage, if you want to keep the property as a rental property. So 2 things. Again, if your purchase is contingent on sale or a lease of the home, if you intend to keep it as a rental property, you can talk to your lender about that. We can try to locate someone who's looking in advance for a property and sign a lease 60 days out, and then you can go look for a property, or even when you get it under contract, we can then list your property for lease at the same time. There's a few different ways that you can tackle this scenario. And it does get a little bit hairy. It boils down to timing, but contract timelines can be extended, modified, changed as needed. And as long as you can work that out with the seller of the home that you're purchasing, should not prohibit you from being able to do both or achieve those goals. Again, this is all one good reason to have an agent when you go to buy a home and to sell a home, because these situations are not common for most people unless they deal in real estate transactions all the time. As an agent, this is primarily what we do. That's what I do. Your pre-approval amount will be the loan. Okay, well, we have to do this one. Okay, this will be the last one. So your pre-approval amount will be the loan amount that you're approved for. True or false? True or false? It all depends on the appraisal, they say in air quotes. Just because you contract the house a certain price, it doesn't mean the mortgage company will approve the amount. So yeah, so this is, that gets a little hairy too. Man, this is some good stuff. There's reason that these are myths or misconceptions. Your pre-approval amount can change based on your circumstances, day by day, month by month. What you're approved for one day will not be the same the next day, because rates can change. If you don't lock the rate in, because your financial situation can change if you go buy a car or whatever else. And if you get a home under contract for like your max pre-approved amount, and say that rate changes and you now can't afford the extra $10,000 you offered, which you were pre-approved for yesterday, you're not going to qualify for today when you lock it under contract. Get a few more days on that approval, on the contract requirements. And some sellers might be willing to work with you on that, but if you're in a multiple offer situation, maybe not. The thing to keep in mind is this. When you go to make an offer on a house, everything becomes negotiable. And once you're under contract, it's more advantageous to everyone involved to keep that house under contract. So something that often happens in these last couple of years, I've seen it happen a few times where houses go on the market and they go under contract, maybe for asking, and an appraisal comes in and requires that price to come down, or the seller's going to have to concede towards some closing costs, which effectively is going to be that cost difference between what it appraises for and what it contracted for. So this is another a sort of gray area. What's happening here is you might actually be qualified for $575, but the house only appraised for $550. Well, the lender can only approve so much of that appraised amount, maybe a little bit over that appraised amount, but right now probably zero over the appraised amount. So they're only going to approve $550. You're going to have a down payment. You need that full down payment in order to qualify for that loan. So the seller is going to have to back off that price, or they can actually, concede to some concessions, some money toward your closing costs, which become a larger down payment to the lender. There's a couple different ways if they want to keep that sales price higher for whatever reason. Now, yeah, again, 100 ways to skin a cat. It's good to work with someone who has been in these situations before and can represent you throughout the process. And, keep the deal on the table. First and foremost, bring it to close and make sure that it is impacting you the best way that it possibly can. Because the thing to remember is when you go to purchase a house, you make your money on the purchase. And in every home, it's a home, but it's also an investment. And so if you want to get the most out of your investment, you got to remember this, that you make your money on the purchase. If you plan to sell it in 2 years, 5 years, and 50 years, liquidate that asset, or convey it to your kids, or whatever the purpose, the intent is. So what that means is when you go to buy a home, you want to get into the best deal you could possibly create for your money, because at the end of the day, when you go to sell it, it's all going to depend on the market. It's going to depend on the buyer, and it's going to depend on circumstances you cannot control right now. So the real way to make money in real estate, or really in anything, I think it applies to most things in life, is to know exactly what you're buying and getting yourself into and get the best deal you can possibly get today. That's going to be where you make the most money tomorrow, 5 years from now, 50 years from now, whatever you plan to do with that property, with your legacy. All right. That's it. Mythbusters, Real Estate 101. I think we might do this again sometime, because there's like 30 more of these things that I found in the Google. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this is helpful to anybody out there. Comment below. Let me know what your myths and misconceptions are. Let me answer your questions. Let's try to paint a real picture for those that are looking to buy, looking to sell, and still have questions about the process and how it works. Because I've run into some crazy ass scenarios just in the last few days, last couple weeks. This year's been weird. Dexter, buddy, you doing all right? He's good. He's shifting. He's gonna go back to sleep. I'm gonna see you later. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.